Right. Well, hi, everybody. I'm Greg, and we're going to be working on the book of Joshua tonight. First question is, what is the meaning or significance of the title of this book? Well, it's the first Bible book to bear the name of its principal character. And there's some interesting things about Joshua, the name Joshua. It's the Hebrew form of the word Jesus, which I did not know that until I started doing this study, and I think that's pretty interesting. And this book, it's like in the New Testament, we just went through the Gospels, and they were named after the writers, but they were all about Jesus. And this book is in a similar fashion, but it's about the actions of Joshua, but in a way, he's kind of an Old Testament version of Jesus. And you'll see a lot of similarities in the book of Joshua as we move on through it. You'll see a lot of Jesus in this. I think that's pretty significant. It's the sixth book of the Bible. The genre is history, and it's the first of 12 books in a row about history. And who wrote Joshua? Well, probably Joshua. There's a little bit of argument amongst the scholars. Could have been written maybe at a later time, but everything that I see, for the most part, people believe it was written by Joshua. And it kind of makes sense to me that it was written by Joshua. Joshua was the aide of Moses for like 40 years. And so he was exposed to all the writings of the Torah, first 5 books. So he's probably been involved in a lot of writing, being Moses' aide. So I think that it was probably Joshua who wrote the book, and he may have, had some scribes or something helping him. How many chapters? Anybody know? How many chapters in Joshua? 24. And then, Kathy, maybe you could go to the timeline.
Are you sharing your screen?
Now
there we go.
All right. There's our time. Is this the timeline?
That's the timeline, yeah.
Okay.
I think that's a pretty cool, it's all cartoons and all like that.
You draw good.
Yeah. Greg worked hard on that.
Yeah. And it's kind of, and this is kind of what we'll be going through tonight, but and this is the short version. You can see up in the left, though, I thought it was pretty interesting. There's you got Abraham and Moses and how it, works its way down towards Joshua. And what's interesting is, the promise made to Abraham was, I looked it up and it was like, you can go anywhere from 500 to 680 years before Joshua. So that was when the promise was made about the promised land. Of course, then it goes to Moses. And when I'm looking at Moses, I'm kind of looking at him as the first, an Old Testament version of Jesus, like we talked about earlier, about how Joshua is similarly a version of Jesus too. And to me, I kind of think Moses was like the first coming of Jesus, and Joshua is kind of like the second coming of Jesus. But that's just my opinion. But as we move on through the first, you look at 1 through 5, that's Joshua leads Israel. And that's kind of, it shows Joshua equals the new Moses. Then obey the commands of the Torah. And then number 2, the sending of the spies. And then 3 and 4 leads Israel into the promised land. And then 5 is the appearance of the angel of the Lord. And then 6-12 is the battles with the Canaanites. 13:22, Joshua divides up the land, and if you'll notice there, it says boring, so we're not going to talk a lot about that. It was, it's boring to us, but to the Israelites, it was very important, the division of the land, because that's where you'll be living, and that's what you'll kind of take ownership of. And then 23 and 24 are Joshua's final words. And then the era of the book is the conquest era.
That's a new era. We haven't done that.
We haven't done the conquest, yeah. And that's, it's kind of, after all this time that they've been wandering around in the desert for the past 40 years, it's kind of come to the time of reckoning when we'll have, when they get to enter the promised land. It's a real exciting time. So we'll move on to chapter 1. And if you look at chapter 1, the first few words are after the death of Moses. So Joshua's probably about 60 years old, and he's been Moses' aide for the past 40 years. So I don't know if you've ever worked for someone had a boss or something, and maybe something happened to that boss, or maybe it wasn't you, but you've seen this happen before. A boss leaves and then the underling steps up. Well, there's a lot of, you don't know how this underling is going to be, this new leader that you have. So there's a lot of questioning of the new leader and that sort of thing. And that's kind of, when Moses dies, that's kind of the signal that now is the time to move into the promised land. So so Joshua probably, I don't know, Joshua was a great leader, but there might have been some anxiety there about the situation that he's now in. Now he's the leader. He doesn't have Moses to help him anymore. And of course, all the people, they've been, for the most part, all the people, a lot of them were born in the desert during this 40-year period. And all they've ever known is Moses as the leader. The only two people even used to live in Egypt was Joshua and Caleb, and all the rest are new, and they've always known Moses as the leader. Now we got a new one, Joshua. So I was going to see if I could have someone read the first verses 1 through 9 on chapter 1. We have a volunteer.
Would you like me to?
Yeah.
Okay. Sure. 1 through 9, right?
1 through 9.
Okay. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord spoke to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' assistant, saying, "My servant Moses is dead. Now proceed to cross the Jordan, you and all this people, into the land that I am giving to them, to the Israelites. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given to you, as I promised to Moses. From the wilderness and the Lebanon, as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, the great sea in the west shall be your territory. No one shall be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not fail you or forsake you. Be strong and courageous, for you shall put this people in possession of the land that I swore to their ancestors to give them. Only be strong and very courageous, being careful to act in accordance with all the law that my servant Moses commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, so that you may be successful wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart out of your mouth. You shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to act in accordance with all that is written in it. For then you shall make your way prosperous, and then you shall be successful. I hereby command you, be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened or dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go."
That's pretty cool. We just talked about how Joshua had a lot of, well, I don't know if he had any anxiety. He may have been have done it all. But there was probably some level of that of being unsure. But now it says the Lord said to Joshua. So now the Lord has kind of taken the initiative, and he's speaking to Joshua in the same way that he spoke to Moses. So that's got to be an amazing thing to have the Lord actually speak to you, especially in this kind of detail. So that was probably a pretty good shot in the arm for Joshua.
You could probably be a little more courageous if God told you to.
That's
Is
right.
that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
if I wasn't sure about things and then God instructed me what to do, I would feel a lot better
Yeah.
about things.
Okay, now that I've actually heard you say that.
Yeah. Okay, things are clear now.
Yeah.
So he knows what to do. So he gives the order in the next few verses that we will cross the Jordan in 3 days. Get ready. So the people, they're on the move now. They know what they're going to do. Like I said, they've been wandering around with Moses all these years, and now they're moving. They're moving to the river. Of course, you don't know how you're going to get across the river, but we're moving to the river. And this is in the time of year when it's at the flood stages. So they might have a little bit of interpretation about that. And also in chapter 1, Joshua reminds the 2.5 tribes of their obligation to supply the men of fighting age as the promise they made to Moses, that they will be crossing the river too and fighting. And then when they're done with taking the land, they can return back to their wives and children who will remain across the river. So could I ask maybe someone read verses 16 and 17? Are you going here?
In chapter 1?
Chapter 1.
I got it. And they answered Joshua, "Whatever you've commanded us, we will do, and wherever you send us, we will go. Just as we fully obeyed Moses, so we will obey you. Only may the Lord your God be with you as he was with Moses."
So the people sound like they're getting on board and they're getting behind Moses and they're ready to go. So then we're going to move on to chapter 2, which is the story of Rahab and the spies. I think most of it, we just went over that here recently. But, so we're going to go over it again.
Or you could quiz us.
Joshua sent 2 spies from Shittim. That's what it's. That's where they're at. That's where they're camped at as they're getting ready to cross the river. He secretly sent these spies to spy on the land, and I thought he wanted them to kind of focus on Jericho because that's the closest the city to where they're at. So they end up staying at Rahab's house. And it wasn't long after they were there that, I don't know the situation, but that the king's men had found out that there were some people spying. And so the king has immediately, I guess he heard they went to Rahab's house, so he sends people there and they're looking for him. And she tells him that they left at dusk and that if he hurried, maybe he could catch them. And so that's what the king's men did. She had hidden them in the roof under some stalks of flax, which is, I guess during that time they put a lot of their grain and that sort of thing on the roof to let it dry. So there was probably a substantial amount up there, and it might, but the king's men didn't look there. So maybe God was protecting them. And then I was going to see if I could have someone read chapter 2, verses 8 through 11.
I can do it.
Okay.
Before the spies lay down for the night, she went up on the roof and said to them, "I know that the Lord has given you this land, and that a great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We have heard how the Lord dried up the waters of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to Sihon and Og, the 2 kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, whom you completely destroyed. When we heard of it, our hearts melted in fear, and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on earth below.
So that's some pretty good military information. But it also shows, to me, kind of a conversion of Rahab to the God of the Israelites. Hiding the spies, if they would have been found, she would have probably been killed, and her entire family too. So, like I kind of was talking about earlier, it's there's a lot of similarity. It's like a conversion thing. Like today, people convert to Christ. Well, at this time, there's an opportunity for people, to side with the Lord, and that looks kind of like what Rahab has done here. And she goes on to make an agreement with the spies that when the Israelites come and take over, that they will spare her, and they agree to do that. She's to, as she's directing them on their escape and to hide in the hills, she's tied the scarlet. She's going to the rope that they go down, I guess, is scarlet covered, or I can't remember, but the agreement is that they will tie a scarlet cord in her window, and that will identify where she lives, and all those in her house will be spared. And that was kind of one of my questions. Would you consider Rahab a convert, or do you think Rahab was brave? I think she was. I think it took a lot of courage.
I think she was wise because she knew what God had done already for the Israelites.
Mm-hmm.
And so I definitely think she was brave, but I think there was some wisdom there because their reputation pretty much says that they're going to come in and take over whatever they want.
Mm-hmm.
So she found a way for her and her family to be saved when everyone else around her went through destruction.
Mm-hmm.
And because of God and his plan.
Mm-hmm.
And so.
And of course, we know Rahab is in the line of Jesus, which is a pretty cool thing, a pretty good, a reward of sorts.
I think Scripture credits her with having faith. Does that sound right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So she had faith in God, which wasn't that hard considering they'd seen what he had done.
Mm-hmm.
But she believed it. Then other times we read Scripture and people see what Jesus did and they still didn't believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so she knew what God had done and put her faith in him. She believed that he had done that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think probably believed that he could rescue her too.
Mm-hmm. So afterwards they cross the river, and then they report back to Joshua, and they give the report about the Lord has given the whole land into our hands. All the people are melting in fear because of us. And then we'll move to chapter 3, and this is the crossing of the Jordan. So this is another big event. It's kind of another like we have God speaking to Joshua in the same way he spoke to Moses, and now he's gonna stop the flow of the river Jordan, which is kind of like the Red Sea crossing. So there's some similarities there between the two. And he says, get ready to move, and watch the Ark of the Covenant, and they have to maintain a distance of 3,000 feet from the Ark of the Covenant, which that's over half a mile. I thought that's kind of shows the kind of power that the ark commands. So I'm going to read Joshua 3, verse 7. And the Lord said to Joshua, "Today I will begin to exalt you in the eyes of all Israel, so that they may know that I am with you as I was with Moses." So there's God speaking to Joshua again, and he's telling him he's got his back. So Joshua's another pat on the back, so his confidence is boosted even more. So then he directs the people when the priest carrying the ark touched the water. You need to be ready to move, and that's what happened. They moved the ark down, and they actually touched the water, and then it starts piling up 25 miles upstream at the town called Adam. So then the people make the crossing. Maybe I could have someone, maybe, Bryce, could you read verses 9 through 13?
Mm-hmm. Joshua said to the Israelites, "Come here and listen to the words of the Lord your God. This is how you will know that the living God is among you, and that he will certainly drive out before you the Canaanites, Hittites, Hivites, Perizzites, Girgashites, Amorites, and Jebusites. See, the Ark of the Covenant and the Lord of all the earth will go into the Jordan ahead of you. Now then choose 12 men from the tribes of Israel, one from each tribe, and as soon as the priests who carry the Ark of the Lord of all the earth, set foot in the Jordan, its waters flowing downstream will be cut off and stand up in a heap."
So that's what happened. Can you kind of imagine the excitement, of crossing the Jordan and to finally going into the promised land? No one, had ever done a thing like except for Joshua and Caleb. They had crossed the Red Sea. Everyone else had heard all the stories about what happened, and now they're actually living this experience. I'm sure when they saw the water piling up at the town of Adam, they knew God was with them, and so they crossed the sea.
So do you think Joshua and Caleb were like, "Hey, y'all watch this"?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Y'all watch. This is going to be so freaky.
Yeah, it's amazing. So we'll keep moving on. We're going to go to chapter 4. Yeah. Kathy, could you put that map up of
Sure.
the southern campaign?
Is this the right one?
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah. You can see the green lines just above the Dead Sea. That's where they've made the crossing. Yeah. So chapter 4 is kind of a continuation of the crossing of the Jordan. You can leave that.
Oh, leave it up? Okay.
After everyone had crossed the Jordan, the Lord had Joshua, he chose 12 men, one from each tribe, and they were to take 12 stones from the river where the priests are standing, and they took the stones to Gilgal. You can see that on the map at the end of the arrow there. And it looks like it's about a distance of, I don't know, 7 or 8 miles from the river that they carried these stones. And that's where they would just set up a monument, to remember this. And there's a lot of, all through the book of Joshua, they set up these memorials or reasons to remember. And this is the first one. It's the 12-stone memorial, so that they would remember, this great event. And it's, maybe I could have, I'll just read verse 14 in chapter 4. That day, the Lord exalted Joshua in the sight of all Israel, and they stood in awe of him all the days of his life, just as they had stood in awe of Moses. So after this happened, Moses, he's the new Moses, or I should say Joshua, he's the new Moses, and the people are behind him. I think that's pretty good. And then we're going to move to chapter 5. So this is actually Elizabeth Ann's area, and I'm going to go ahead and do the best I can with it.
This is my first sermon I preached.
That's pretty awesome that you remembered that.
Yeah, I made her walk around.
So if I'm at the Elizabeth Ann, you can jump in there anytime.
You know what? I said circumcised enough. I'm going to leave that.
Okay, this is, you can take the map down if you want to for now. Circumcision, and then this, they celebrate the Passover at Gilgal. And they also, Joshua has an experience with the meeting of the angel of the Lord. The beginning of chapter 5, you have the Amorite kings. They're kind of they're kind of organizing, but they're also, their hearts are melted in fear that they just heard about how the Israelites had crossed the Jordan. So they're, and they know kind of the history of the Israelites, how they came from Egypt, crossed the Red Sea, and how they defeated the kings east of the Jordan River. So they're pretty nervous. You would think that they would maybe just go ahead and surrender, and say, we'll serve you. That's that's kind of the way things are today. I know, you wonder why people don't, convert to Jesus. But that's the way it's always been, and that's the way it is at this time. So anyway, they've been wandering in the desert for the past 40 years, and so no one has been circumcised except for maybe Joshua and Caleb. So that's what they do. Joshua tells them to get some flint knives, and all the men are going to be circumcised. And so that's what they do. All the men are circumcised, and then they stay there at Gilgal until they're all healed. So they're in kind of enemy territory, and all the men are kind of injured, so they're a little bit vulnerable. But to me, this is kind of like, when we go to heaven, when we die, we'll go to heaven and we'll have new bodies. But this is kind of, to me, a kind of a reflection of that. All the people, they're new people now. They're God's people, but this is their way of showing that they're dedicated to God, and that He is their God. And also, they went ahead and celebrated the Passover, and this is the first time, I didn't know that, but this is the first time since the year after crossing the Red Sea, when the people had sinned. There had been no there's been no celebration since that time. That was like 39 years ago. And they also ate produce from the land. They ate unleavened bread and roasted grain as they're celebrating the Passover. And the manna stopped. I thought, can you imagine all these years you've been following Moses, and now you've been eating the manna your entire life, and the manna stops. There's a lot of new things going on since Joshua has became the leader. But everyone's working together as one unit, and they, like they said, Joshua is their leader. And then just before they're moving to Jericho, and actually near Jericho, Joshua meets an angel, and he asks the angel, or he doesn't know it's an angel, he just sees a warrior, and he asks him, are you for us, or with us, or are you against us? And he said, the angel said, neither. I am for the Lord. So I think if Joshua had any ideas about who the leader of the Israelites, it's the Lord, and the Lord is the one who's going to fight the battle for them.
That really struck me when I read it too, because I think the angel of the Lord is also saying God doesn't choose sides. You have to choose God.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not like he's looking at the Israelites and the Canaanites and going, I like the Israelites better. It's that he's offered the Israelites a chance to be on his side. And that's why the Lord's angel is there. And so I thought that was kind of appropriate for even today, where people are so driven to choose a side.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not our sides to be chosen. We need to choose to be on the Lord's side.
Mm-hmm.
And let the battle belong to him, instead of
That's right.
thinking that we have to be on one side and other people are on another.
Mm-hmm.
We're either on the Lord's side or we're not.
That's right. Everyone kind of that's part of being a Christian is turning things over to the Lord and not trying to do everything yourself.
Yeah.
And it's so much easier when the Lord it's leading you and you're following him, as opposed to trying to do it yourself.
And hoping he supports you.
That's right. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, you have to be doing the right things. So that was good. That was chapter 5. We'll move on to chapter 6. And this is the fall of Jericho. Maybe someone could, maybe Bryce, could you read Joshua 6, verses 2 through 7?
Then the Lord said to Joshua, see, I have delivered Jericho into your hands, along with its kings and fighting men. March around the city once with all the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry trumpets of ram's horns in the front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times, with the priests blowing the trumpets. When you hear them sound a long blast on the trumpets, have the whole army give a loud shout. Then the wall of the city will collapse and the army will go up, everyone straight in. So Joshua, son of Nun, called the priests and said to them, take up the ark of the covenant of the Lord and have 7 priests carry trumpets in front of it. And he ordered the army, advance, march around the city with an armed guard going ahead of the ark of the Lord.
Okay, so we've got a video, kind of a reenactment.
Little helpers for the story.
Joshua fought the battle of Jericho.
Jericho.
Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, and the walls came tumbling down.
Yay! I like it. Here we go.
Yeah, that was Sophia in the background.
Yeah.
She
was
didn't
helping.
want to be in front of the
Yeah.
camera, right? So that was pretty good.
There we go.
Good. So, of course, the instructions were all the silver, gold, bronze were to go to the Lord's treasury. And only Rahab's house is spared. Everything else was destroyed, the people, everything in it. And Jericho was not to be rebuilt. It's kind of another thing to remember, another, I call it a memorial, just like the 12 stones when they crossed the river. But as in times past, everyone didn't obey, and that's what chapter 7 is about. And it's about Achan's sin. Joshua sent spies to Ai to check out the city. And the spies came back and they said, "There's no worries. You don't need to send everyone. Only send 3,000 troops." So that's what they did. They sent 3,000 troops, but they were routed. And of course, everything's been going well for Israel up to this point, and all of a sudden, it's like God has abandoned them. And so Joshua, he tears his clothes and he puts ashes on his head. He asks the Lord, why, what happened? And God tells Joshua that Israel has sinned and that he needs to fix it. So they gather representatives from all the different tribes. And as it turns out, Achan confesses to what he did. And he had kept some of the objects and hid them. So he's discovered, and what happens is another memorial. He and his entire family are stoned to death and burned, and then they pile stones on top of Achan. And that's kind of what happens, even to us in the future. People today who don't, follow Jesus or convert to Jesus, that they don't have a good future, just like what happened to Achan. So that's kind of the sad story, but so they solved the problem, they found out, and they corrected it. So in chapter 8, Ai is destroyed, and Joshua, they kind of have a little different plan here. Joshua sends 30,000 troops north of Ai, and then Joshua and 5,000 troops will attack from the west. And what they're going to do is they're going to go in, attack, and then the people in the city of Ai will, think it's, hey, we've already beat them once. We're doing good. So that's what happened. Joshua moves in with the 5,000, and then the minute that the troops from Ai come out, Joshua and the 5,000 start retreating in kind of a panic mode. And what they do is they draw all the troops away from the city, and then the 30,000 move in and destroy the city. And the troops look back and they see what's happening, and then Joshua and his men stop retreating, and they catch them in kind of in the middle there, and then they destroy all the troops of Ai. And in the city of Ai, as opposed to Jericho, the people are allowed to keep all the plunder. So Ai ends up another memorial. It's a heap of ruins, and they take Ai's king and impale him on a pole. And then at sunset, his body is thrown into the entrance of Ai and piled up with stones. And from there, they travel to Mount Ebal and renew their covenant with the Lord. And they built an altar there and make sacrifices to the Lord. And Joshua wrote on stones a copy of the law, and he read the entire word of the law to the people. Chapter 9 is the Gibeonite deception. We're talking about how Rahab, converted to the Lord. Kind of the same thing is going to happen with the Gibeonites. All the kings west of the Jordan were joining forces except for the Gibeonites. And the Gibeonites resorted to a ruse. They sent a delegation of people. They had just kind of worn out supplies, and their clothes looked very old. And they talked, they knew what the Israelites had done, and they begged for peace. And Israel agreed. And of course, then they found out that the Gibeonites lived nearby, and of course, the Israelites were upset. And so Joshua allowed them to live as servants, as woodcutters and water carriers to fill the needs of the altar of the Lord. So you think the Gibeonites, was that a form of a conversion? I think it was. I think that they feared the Lord. Sometimes fear, it's a good thing. And especially when it comes with God, it's good to fear the Lord. And I think they could see the handwriting on the wall, so they were more than willing to be servants to the Israelites. Chapter 10 is the sun stands still. So maybe put the map back up. So you can see Gibeon there. So the southern kings attacked Gibeon, and the Gibeonites begged Joshua for help. So the entire army marches from Gilgal, which is just a little bit, looks like 20 miles or so, 15 miles, maybe. They march and they attack the kings that are attacking Gibeon. And it kind of, when they start routing the 5 kings, and they start heading south, and God throws the enemy into confusion. And then they fled from Beth Horon to Ezekiah. You can see those. And all that way, there's a hailstone falling from the sky, and that kills more of their troops than the Israelites were killing. And they keep going south, and they're continually routed. I mean, you can look at these distances that they're traveling. You can see 10, 20, 30, and all this time, it's a large battle going on. So maybe I could get a volunteer to read verses 12 and 14 in chapter 10. Maybe Elizabeth?
Yeah, sure. On the day when the Lord gave the Amorites over to the Israelites, Joshua spoke to the Lord, and he said in the sight of Israel, "Sun, stand still at Gibeon, and moon in the valley of Hylon, I don't know." And the sun stood still, and the moon stopped until the nation took vengeance on their enemies. It is not written in the book of. Did you want me to keep going?
No, that 14, 12 and 14.
Oh, no, we're not done yet. Is this not written in the book of Joshua? The sun stopped in mid-heaven and did not hurry to set for about a whole day. There has been no day like it before or since, when the Lord heeded a human voice, or the Lord fought for Israel.
All right, thanks.
That was 14.
Yeah, okay.
Chapter 2.
Yeah, so, I think the reason, I don't think, let me say, that's the first time that God has taken directions from a man. And it's pretty significant because I think it was all part of the battle. They needed more time. And God must have given extra strength to the Israelites, where they're pretty charged up. And so, and plus it was a sign, that all the world would be aware of. So I think that it's one of the, to me, one of the biggest miracles in the entire Bible, to stop the sun for a day. You can talk about crossing the river, but when you stop the sun, that's pretty amazing. And that was done at the command of Joshua. Of course, the Lord did it, but so they went ahead and routed all the troops, and then the kings of the 5 kings, they hid in a cave, and of course they blocked the cave with rocks till sunset. Actually, they just blocked the caves, and then when they were finished with the battle, they pulled the kings out and held them on poles, and until sunset, and then threw them in a cave and piled up rocks at the entrance. So that was you can see how they moved into the middle of Canaan on the green lines, and then they've taken over the southern. Then they moved back to Gilgal. So then we'll go to the map of the northern kings, and I'm not going to talk a whole lot more. But it's kind of more of the same. Joshua, the other kings, they met at the waters of Merom, and they had a battle there, and of course they ended up getting routed. And all these different cities after Jericho, the Israelites were able to keep all the plunder. We moved to chapter 12 is just a long list. If you look in your Bibles, you can see it's a list of all the kings. It talks about the kings east of the Jordan, that Moses was involved in. And then after that, in this time of Joshua, there's 31 kings that were defeated west of the Jordan. And then we'll move to we'll talk about, if you'll just put the map up like the divided land. So chapters 13 through 22 talk about the division of the land. And this is a map of all the land. And Caleb, he is given, a promise was made to him, and he's given the town of Hebron for his faithfulness. That's about the only mention of Caleb in the book of Joshua. And then the land is divided, and then you can see the sanctuary cities. They're established. And all of this, of course, like I said, was very important to the Israelites. And if you'll kind of notice, Manasseh, that's the half tribe of Manasseh. It looks like they've got the most territory. They've got east and west of the Jordan. and then the other supposed half tribe is Ephraim, and that's we'll talk about Ephraim here in a minute and Manasseh. So we move on to chapters 22, and this is where the eastern tribes return home. And that's Manasseh, the Gadites, and the Reubenites. They're on the right of the Jordan. But on the way, after they've been released, because they've taken over all the land, they built an altar, right there at the Jordan River. And then the Israelites get upset. They think maybe they built an altar for themselves. It's kind of all a big misunderstanding. They finally get together and they explain to them, no, this altar was to be a witness for all generations, that they would worship the Lord only and obey his laws. So I'm glad they got that worked out. Then in chapter 23, that's Joshua's farewell. And he's 110. And he recalls all the victories, but also reminds the people of the areas yet to be possessed. Their mission still remains to be the people of God's kingdom in the world. But he gives a warning, and maybe, Kathy, you could read that, chapter 23, verse 12 and 13, and these are our memory verses.
But if you turn away and ally yourselves with the survivors of these nations that remain among you, and if you intermarry with them and associate with them, sorry. Wait, I'll finish. Then you may be sure that the Lord your God will no longer drive out these nations before you. Instead, they will become snares and traps for you, whips on your backs and thorns in your eyes, until you perish from this good land which the Lord your God has given you.
Okay. I'm sorry, that wasn't the memory verse.
Good, because that's hard.
Okay, so then we'll move on to chapter 24. And this is where the covenant is renewed at Shechem. And back in chapter 8, I think it was Mount Ebal, they renewed their covenant. So now this is, I don't know how many years, it's like, I guess, 40 or 50 years later. And now they're going to renew their covenant again. The land's been divided. It's kind of Joshua's last official act. And everyone assembles in Shechem, as they did in chapter 8. And he gives a summation of all that's happened since Abraham. Kind of similar to what Moses did just before his death. Let's see. I'll read verse 15. And this is the memory verse. But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, this is what Joshua said, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the God your ancestors served beyond your great deeds, or the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. And then in chapter 15, Joshua dies. He's buried in the land of his inheritance, Timnath-Serah, which is in Ephraim. Maybe that map one more time.
Yeah.
It doesn't show where that is,
Beth Aaron.
but the thing I wanted to talk, they had carried Joseph's bones from Egypt, and for all the past 40 years, and now all these years later, at the end of Joshua's time, because Joshua just died, and they buried Joseph's bones were buried at Shechem. That's where they had renewed the covenant, and if you notice, that's right in between Manasseh and Ephraim, and those were the sons of Joseph. So he's planted in his, he is buried in his ancestral, what will be his ancestral home. Anyway, his descendants home, I should say. And that's all of Joshua. And some lessons that we learned from Joshua. Joshua had to wait on God. It took time before Joshua was ready to leave. And he was about 60 when he started to leave, and then he died at 110. He was a man of courage. He didn't quit. He didn't fight alone. And the secret of Joshua's success was his devotion to the Word of God. And that's everything.
Good job, Greg.
Thank you. Yeah, that was rough. I've never done anything like this.
All right, I have a question.
Okay.
Okay, so in our memory verse, it ends, but as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. And I was just wondering about, and even the challenge to choose this day whom you serve. And what did it look like for them to actually serve the Lord? Not just believe, but to serve. And what does it look like for us to serve the Lord rather than just believe in him? What do you think? Does anybody have an answer to that? What's the difference between believing and serving? And what does that look like?
Well, believing was like when Rahab believed and she saved the spies. And serving is when you actually do something for God or you do something for others, and you don't sit idle. You actually are doing something and moving.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good explanation of the difference. So how do you think the Israelites served God? They didn't hand out bulletins at the door, right?
They fought those battles.
They fought battles for God, didn't they? Yeah. Yeah. Good. Any other examples?
Well, I think you kind of pointed to something that we kind of talked about previously. And that is, in the Old Testament, obedience was to a written word and a code that was interpreted by a group of rabbis. And then a bunch of rabbis that started interpreting what other rabbis would say. And so you then have a hierarchy and a government, really. And in the New Testament, with the internal, I guess, inhabitation of God inside us, service is obedience. We just do what they say, what he says.
Yeah.
Instead of what he says, then men say. And then we obey that, because there was probably a lot of dissatisfaction on the part of the Israelites when they were obeying men. And God calls out in his word, there was only a few people who lived life of faith in the Old Testament. People like Abraham, Moses.
Yeah.
They actually lived a life of faith and not of, what's the word I'm looking for?
Not religion.
Yeah, not religion. There's another word for it. Living by the book.
Legalism.
Yeah.
Okay. Good answer. And I think that's correct. I think that I'm just thinking, this is my opinion. But for me, it seemed like the Israelites centered their lives around God. So whether they were going to battle or stepping out in obedience and keeping the feasts and worshiping and all of that played out, all of that obedience would have taken up a lot of time in their lives, not just an hour on Sunday morning, right?
Well,
they were obeying as they went.
I don't disagree, but I have to overlay on top of that. The Israelites, the people got to the place of arguing with God about kings, because they wanted what non-godly nations had with victories and spoils of war.
Yeah.
And that wasn't in the Bible, and that wasn't in their law either.
So it wasn't serving God.
No. And so there's a lot of evidence of them kind of living for themselves or their interpretation of what is success. And that's part of why I think the Old Testament was a harder place to live, is because God didn't say, just obey what I say.
Yeah. But I do think in the New Testament, though, we still have a challenge to serve, to live even at God's pleasure and not ours.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's what that serving looks like today, is that we're here for his purpose and his kingdom. It's not that he's here for us.
Right, and that's what brokenness leads us, and why, that's part of his scheme for helping us to focus on him. There is no equivalent in the Old Testament.
Yeah. Good answer. Anybody else have any observations, questions, or thoughts about Joshua?
Well, I think it took a lot of faith. One, for Rahab to do what she did, and another for them to march around that city for 7 days, once a day for 7 days, and then to do it exactly the way God said or the way Joshua instructed. I think that took a lot of faith.
Absolutely.
Well, I think when the special people called by God to share his message and his word, when he communicated with them, those people carried a lot of weight. And it was easy for them to get behind them, because it would probably felt like God's hand at work and not just the law. I always remember, my favorite is too, early on, this worst spies ever. They snuck in, found out the same day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Oh, yeah.
And then the awkward sentence, we're spies, we're going to go in. So we're going to the prostitute's house.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Well, they didn't have hotels, and her house was on the wall, and so it was probably normal for her to receive travelers. Kind of like in Westerns where everybody would stay above the saloon, and to me, that's just the kind of image I have in my head, is that this was a place where people would stay because they didn't have a Holiday Inn. And so,
I'm sure Joshua made a good choice for the spies. They were probably good at this, would be good at this sort of thing.
Yeah.
And they probably, this was probably a smart thing for them to, you could probably blend in better there than you maybe could trying to stay with some people you don't know in the middle of the city or something.
Well, and because you remember visitors would go to the town square and kind of hang there until somebody invited them to come stay at their place. Well, they didn't need to do that, right? That would have been a giveaway to you. So Joshua was a good leader, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah.
A lot of the Old Testament leaders, well, New Testament too, you see like they really, like almost everybody makes some huge mistake at some point, right? Like Moses killed a guy, right?
Yeah.
And then he struck the rock when he wasn't supposed to. Do you remember anything that Joshua did that was an oops moment like that?
They didn't write it down.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember the time. I think there was, the Battle of Ai, I think that they didn't ask God first. There was one of those battles where they didn't really talk to God about it first. They just went ahead into battle and they lost. So maybe that was the Battle of Ai. But other than that, I can't remember anything where Joshua really had a shortcoming or a misstep. And that makes me appreciate his leadership in his life. I think that he was probably a man of integrity and truly a man that knew God.
Does anyone see the similarities? I mean, I was talking about how Moses, he was like the first coming, and then maybe, to me, it's kind of like Joshua was the second coming of Christ when he does come, and he'll come, more as a conqueror, and he will be leading, the people lead him into God, and everyone moves right into the promised land. It just seems like the Old Testament. I mean, you can look at a lot of these stories, like the book of Joshua. You can kind of taking to, you put it in places where it ties into places like in Revelation and future times, but just in the Old Testament kind of way.
Yeah. Except that he wasn't God, right?
Well, that's right. No, and he wasn't
So,
Jesus either.
yeah, but he was in a way a deliverer.
Right. Mhm.
All right. Any other thoughts? It was great. You did a great job, Greg.
Thank you.
I think we should give Greg.
Thank you.
We couldn't hear Tim clapping, but I think I heard a woohoo there.
I was pretty sure it was going to be a two-parter.
Yeah. Well, it's a good thing those those last chapters were boring. Remember that?
Yeah. Big chunk.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Anybody want to close us in prayer? I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and then we'll do a little praying there.